This is Weather Center Live. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Chris Warren.
And I'm Jen Carfagno. We've got a bit of a break out there from the snowfall, but it's coming back by the weekend.
Yes, for certain parts of the country, in particular the Northeast, again, they're going to see some more snow, and the question we have to ask is, when is this going to end? We'll talk about that coming up.
All right, so that's why Dr. Rick Postel is here, and we've got a lot going on.
This is Weather Center Live, and what we're going to do right now is talk about something that's called the wedge. And what the wedge does is it affects parts of the Southeast in a very noticeable, very big way.
It's a simple machine, though, isn't it? You know, a wedge, simple tool, right? Remember back in the day when you guys learned, you know, about the wedge and the inclined plane and all that?
Chris, help me out.
Well, that's what's happening. It's simple physics.
It is. We've got a high-pressure system here, a cold one, over New England. And weather up here is actually sliding its way down the east side of the Appalachians and getting into the coastal plain of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, with that cold clockwise flow around that high-pressure system not being allowed to go many other places but here, in part because we've talked about it. We have the mountains here, Chris. I know you like to draw mountains, and those are great depictions of the mountains, but the Appalachian Mountains give it essentially nowhere else to go but kind of a conduit to funnel down through the coast. Like
so what we're saying is that the cold Arctic air that we've really got this morning across the Northeast, where temperatures were in the teens, mind you, some of that air has filtered all the way down.
And as that air comes, it warms a little bit.
Yeah, right, it moderates.
But,
you know, in essence.
Yeah, and you know, we were talking about if it would be nice to run some back trajectories. In other words, pick an air parcel this morning, for example, in Georgia, and you could actually do this. There's a way to do this even online. I probably should do this next time, but but run it backwards in time and say, well, where did this air come from? And I'm guessing it probably came from eastern Maine, where I think we're smelling lobster here this morning in Georgia because the air came from here.
You know what it feels like outside in Atlanta? It feels like Seattle.
It feels like Seattle, Portland, Oregon. It feels like London, England. It's a similar. And if you look outside, can we look at Atlanta? Let's go ahead and do that right now before we get into the exact what's going on. Look at this. And that's a drizzly kind of look with 40s.
You can't see the tops of the skyscrapers there as we look down from the Coca-Cola World Headquarters in Atlanta.
Jen, are you a fan of this weather?
No, this is my least favorite kind of weather. I would rather it be 15 degrees.
She gets visually agitated
and
too
sunny.
when she talks about this.
I've never seen Jen upset except talking about
cloudy and windy with an east wind that is relentless.
She's upset. She's mad.
It's raw. It's damp. It's just not comfortable.
All right, so back to why this happens and how this happens, Dr. Postel.
Chris, look at the topography here. Do you like maps that have topography like that?
Yeah, this is great. I mean, the maps here, so you can really see the mountains in here because topography, the land formations, have a huge impact in weather. And in this case, that's the reason for the weather.
Right. This cold, relatively, it's not like 20 degrees out there, but the relatively cool air is shallow and it is relatively dense. So it's coming down here. It is not going to be able to go back over the mountains that way. It's kind of runs up against them and then it says, nope, I'm going to keep going that way, kind of parallel to the mountains.
You see that cloud deck. Let's look at North Carolina, a cold mountain.
Wow.
Look how socked in we are right here with the low clouds and fog.
Yeah. You know what? There is some news on the horizon, good news on the horizon, if you don't like this cold northeast wind in Georgia, because it is eventually going to get eroded by, I would say, 24 to 36 hours from now.
You saw that view from Greenville as well, and you could just see, that low cloudiness that gets, you feel sort of suffocated by this, Greg. I do.
It's not tragic. I mean, it's just a wedge. You'll be okay, I promise. But
tomorrow I'll forget it.
Tomorrow it'll be history. Let's have a look as we go through today and pick your spot on the map, your favorite city. Chattanooga's a wonderful city. I don't know if you've ever been there.
It is a great city. I'd rather be there today than here.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're warmer. But look, you know, continue that northeast wind going overnight tonight. But Jen, look,
the wind changes.
There's a warm front.
How important wind direction is.
Here's the warm front.
It's going to south wind.
It's going to blow through here.
West
It'll be in the 70s everywhere, back up to maybe a little above average for this time of year.
All right, so
Jen will be in her flip-flops, dancing around the neighborhood.
All right, so it will warm up tomorrow, but in the west, especially the southwest, we are not just talking warm, we are talking heat.
It is going to be very hot. We're going to let you know what that means for the LA Marathon. Temperatures are around 90 degrees.
They're going to have a west wind.
I like that.
Hillside that failed and came down.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jen Carfagno.
And I'm Chris Warren. And we're looking at this right here. It is amazing. We do see this, and we have seen this in the past. But if you look at it, you can imagine what that must have been like for people.
First of all, you can see here's the runway, and part of it right here is dropped off.
From what I've read, I think this was the part that wasn't in use. This was more of a kind of a safety, a buffer. And so they brought in this extra land here. But then this bit of it really gave way here. And you can see how this color matches this part of the hillside here. So those are similar. And then this right here is the exposed earth now.
Yeah, we have heard that there were little slippages earlier before this big thing happened. So yeah,
yes,
there was
some warning. And then this is interesting right here is where you can see just how impactful this was. Here's a road going through this town, and then that's it. Yeah. And you can see it pick up again on this side.
A lot of moisture over this area between snow melt and any rain that has fallen in the past 2 weeks. It's been inches of water, basically, that has soaked into this ground. What our grandmothers used to call get sick weather, where it changes so much, right? The temperatures go from warm to cold, back to warm again.
Sure, if you ask people in Charlotte, they'll probably say yes.
Well, you look at the flu tracker right now, it's, still fairly regional across most of the country, widespread in a couple of states in the south and especially in the northeast.
That's right, and we know that weather actually does play a role when it comes to flu season.
But how? You'll find out in this edition of Brainstorm. Sam Champion explains the connection between cold weather and catching. Part of the world, too. I don't actually know the stat in how many years, but this is one of the strongest that has formed here to the east of Australia.
And also, put this into perspective, or think about this. Think about how big the Earth is, and for, this to hit a country that's a big country, it can hit all sorts, all different parts of it. But to hit an island of this size is a pretty big deal. For the eye to go right over it.
Right, the island of Ifate here.
Ifate.
Yeah, and that eye went right over there. And we got a pressure measurement there of 942 millibars. And I'm thinking of two things. It could be right that that was the lowest pressure or somewhat near the lowest pressure of the system, if indeed the pressure surrounding the tropical cyclone was much higher than that, because it matters the pressure gradient. The difference in pressure drives the wind. And if it were indeed as low as 942, then it would have to be the outside pressure being that much higher.
That would have been lower, though, if it really was making a direct hit, that we would have seen a lower pressure.
What I'm saying is not necessarily, because it's possible it's down somewhere around 940 millibars, but in order for it to be a Cat 5, it would have had to have surrounding pressures much higher. What I think is more likely is that it actually was lower than 942, but the lowest pressure, the pressure minimum, just missed, was by 5 or 10 miles from that observing point. So you went from about 940 at that observing point to perhaps as down to as low as 900, 5 or 10 miles away from that.
And so we look at these other islands in the chain up next.
Right. And they are coming down the track.
Yeah.
This is really not weakening very quickly. I mean, you can see it's holding its structure very well, and the eye is moving southwestward, and the core of the cyclone is intact. So there is a nasty tempest underneath those cloud patterns that is going to continue to move across that island chain.
All right, great. Thank you very much. All right, Weather Center Live continues after this. Vivian Brown, Mark.